But this is an interesting game from a legacy standpoint, if you will. And I don't use the word legacy lightly because, look, these guys aren't at the end of their careers. Do you know what I mean? It's not like Lamar Jackson, this is his final run in the NFL, or Josh Allen, can he make one more run? These are guys who are in the primes of their careers, and it's not to suggest for a second that their careers are over. But we are talking about two veterans here, and it's hard to be good forever. I mean, these guys certainly have. But if you're looking at one or the other, which quarterback do you think maybe needs to win now as opposed to the other?
This is a tough one because you could really argue both sides, both for Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. But I think the narrative on Lamar Jackson in the postseason has not necessarily been a good one. And a lot of it will depend on if he has a good game. Because I think if he has a good game, you can't really sit there and say, oh, well, it's Lamar Jackson's fault. Because the guy's had like an MVP season. In fact, his numbers are way better than Josh Allen's, who is the favorite to win MVP. But I feel like Josh Allen and the Bills are so likable that people kind of forgive them a little bit more. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm having a tough time like putting it into words, but so many people want to root for the Bills that if they, continue to lose in the playoffs, people are like, well, what are you going to do? Patrick Mahomes. But it's weird how that same thing does not apply to Lamar Jackson.
It's interesting. Even Double D will say on a regular basis, Lamar Jackson's a playoff failure. Lamar Jackson's going to fail in the playoffs. I think it has to do with franchise, and I think it has to do with what each quarterback has accomplished thus far. For example, Lamar Jackson's a two-time MVP, right? And when you're a two-time MVP and you're that dynamic and you play for a franchise which has won a Super Bowl before, I think the expectation is, all right, when are you going to play like you're an MVP now? When are you going to win a Super Bowl? And you play for the Ravens. They've won Super Bowls. That's what they do. And then conversely, if you're Josh Allen, he hasn't won the MVP yet, may win it this season. It's going to be really close. And he also, you mentioned it, he plays for the Bills. And the Bills are a team that have never won a Super Bowl. They've been mighty close. And if you follow the Bills for any period of time and you're older, you know that they were right there in the 90s. They were one of the best teams in the 90s. They just couldn't get it done. 4 straight Super Bowls, 4 straight losses. So I also think there's a bit of sympathy when it comes to the Bills. Like, you're the Bills, and it's Buffalo, and it's different than Baltimore, and the expectations are different, and also you don't have an MVP quarterback yet. So I think that feeds into it. I think both guys are capable of winning a Super Bowl. There's no question about that. But I do think Lamar needs this more based on what we've seen from him previously and the fact that he plays for the Ravens.
Yeah, and the fact that he's won MVP awards, because isn't that the assumption is if you continue to win MVPs, you should be winning Super Bowls. Remember when this is a conversation about Aaron Rodgers back when he was good at football? Because Aaron Rodgers is a 4-time MVP of the league, but he's only won 1 Super Bowl. Like, it's wild because I remember, the days in which Aaron Rodgers was dominating. The Packers look like the team to beat, but yeah, they only have 1 title to show for it. And maybe that's not even fair, because it's just so hard to win a Super Bowl. But I remember people saying that.
Yeah. And you know what I think a lot of it has to do, and maybe this is a stretch, but I think Patrick Mahomes factors into this a lot. Do you know what I mean? Especially when it comes to Josh Allen. Because Josh Allen is 6-5 all time in the playoffs. Lamar Jackson is 3-4. But if you look at Josh Allen, it's like you look at him and you say, man, if it weren't for the best quarterback on the planet, if it weren't for Patrick Mahomes, you might have a Super Bowl. And you sort of like remember that coin flip game where, the Chiefs got the ball first and then they win, in overtime in the playoffs. And it's like, man, you did everything. You've done everything possible. If not for the Chiefs, you would have a Super Bowl. And so he kind of gets the benefit of the doubt that I think Lamar doesn't get.
Right. Well, because a lot of those games, he had really good games. It was just either his defense letting them down or it's just Patrick Mahomes doing Patrick Mahomes things. Because I was looking, I've got the game logs pulled up of Josh Allen against the Chiefs in his career. 7 touchdowns, only 1 pick, and 802 passing yards. So he's had good numbers, not even putting the rushing yards on there because that's not in front of me. But it's just he's lost in so many close games that have very much entertained us that it's easy to forgive him and say, okay, well, it's not Josh Allen's fault that the Chiefs are just so damn good.
So let me ask you about Lamar Jackson, and you can look at his stats. Is it fair to say that thus far he's been a disappointment in the playoffs? Disappointment is such a hard word. I would say he hasn't met expectations, but I guess relative to what we see from him, what we've seen from him during his career when you're a two-time MVP, maybe he has been a disappointment, but I feel like this is the year, especially now that he has Derrick Henry in a backfield. I don't know if he's going to win the game this weekend. I'm still going back and forth, but I feel like if this is a year when he can finally break through that narrative, then he can do it. And that's the interesting thing about narratives on this show. We talk about these all the time. Once a narrative is set for a team, for a player, for a franchise, for a coach, man, those things are really hard to break through. Like Sam Darnold is a perfect example, right? And I understand he wasn't good in his final two games, but think about it throughout the season. People were just waiting for him to sort of revert to the mean. He kind of did that, and then the narrative just sort of takes hold again. So for Lamar Jackson, he needs for his own narrative, for that playoff disappointment idea to break, he needs to have a deep run here. It's Lamar versus Josh. So we've watched Lamar being just up the road here in D.C., up I-95, and he's done some great things. But so is Josh Allen, has really carried the team this season in Buffalo. What's the case for Josh Allen to win MVP?
Well, I think they both have great cases, and my only contention in this whole argument and debate is that I think that both fan bases, to a large degree, have gone way overboard trying to smear the other. You know, this is not to me, it's like a dirty political ad, right? I think we should all enjoy how great both these guys are, to be quite honest with you. Yeah. And it's really amazing that both these players who had so many detractors and doubters when they came out together in 2018 to be where they are, they're just such special players, right? And we're really fortunate, and I'm really fortunate every game to be on the sidelines and watch Josh Allen perform. And I would say that the case I would make for him is the Bills do lean on Josh more than the Ravens lean on Lamar. We know Lamar has better statistics. There's no doubt. Josh had better stats last year, but Lamar won the MVP for a lot of the same reasons. And I think that the frustration from Bills fans is it seems like the goalposts have moved here a little bit, right? Which is, well, Lamar won it last year because it wasn't about stats, and this year everybody's saying it's about stats, right? But either way, I think you go either way. But the argument is, look, I mean, the Bills came into this year with one wide receiver who caught a pass from Josh Allen last year, and his name is Khalil Shakir. There's no Stephon Diggs. There's no Gabe Davis. They do not have a 1,000-yard receiver. And yet here Josh is, still putting up MVP numbers. And for the very reason that many people did not vote for Josh Allen for the last few years, turnovers, he doesn't have anymore. He has 6 interceptions and 2 lost fumbles, which is incredibly low. So I think that there's a lot of reasons to say, but for me, it's mostly about this is a team that leans on him a lot. They don't ask him to do everything now. They can run the ball really well too, but they do lean on him more, I think, than the Ravens do lean on Lamar because they have Derrick Henry next to him.
Yeah, I think everybody is going to watch this game, obviously, because of the two quarterbacks involved, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. But in your eyes, what's the X factor in this game that has nothing to do, or, maybe it's not through the lens of, hey, this quarterback's going to go off? Because, we've seen it from Josh Allen. He's had great playoff games, but the Bills have lost a lot of those still. So what's the X factor in this game? Let me ask for the defense.
Well, I think it's how they employ their linebackers. The Bills play more nickel than any team in the NFL because Taron Johnson is unbelievable at his job. He's an all-pro nickel corner. And even though he's smaller, he's great against the run. But against this team, because they're so big, because they have Derrick Henry, they have a big fullback, the Bills might have to run more 4-3. They might have to run 3 linebackers. And if you remember in week 4, a lot of reasons why Bills fans are much more optimistic in this game, the Bills were without all 3 players at their second level, and I'd argue maybe their 3 most important defenders, and that is their middle linebacker, Terrell Bernard, weak side linebacker, Matt Milano, and nickel corner, Taron Johnson. None of them played in that game. So we'll see how the Bills deploy it, but I think that the Bills could, depart from their normal base nickel package and go maybe more 4-3 so they can have extra linebacker on the field to defend Derrick Henry. We know how great Lamar is, but to me, if you have to choose which guy you have to make sure does not control the game, it's got to be Derrick Henry, because if you control the game on the ground, then it could be lights out because Lamar is going to have a lot more time back there. If you can stop Derrick Henry and force them to be a little bit more one-dimensional, I think you take your chances, at least with having Lamar having to put the ball in the air and make a couple special plays.
Sal, I always find it interesting how teams evolve over the courses of seasons, right? And sometimes you see teams get better, sometimes you see them get worse. The Bills are one of those teams that has slowly gotten better. How is it different than the team that lost to the Ravens back in September?
Number one, going back to the injuries, I said on defense, they're clearly a different team. on that side of the ball. Matt Milano broke his leg a year and a few months ago in London, and he missed all of 2023 after that. He missed most of 2024. He came back in December. He's been getting his legs back under that. Number two, Terrell Bernard missed that game. It was just a week after hurting his pec. He's back in now. Also, I think on the other side of the ball, though, offensively, they're different because, again, this is a whole new group of receivers Josh is working with. This is week 4 of the year. And while they had some time on task, it was really they had a road game the week before that, but we don't count Miami as a road game, guys, because Buffalo fans just take over that stadium, right? So it was really their first true road game of the season. I think, communication, things like that. But I think overall, holistically, they're just dominating on the offensive line now. I mean, really dominating. They ran for 210 yards last week against a very, very good Denver Broncos defense, and that was the most rushing yards in the playoff game for this team since 1995. I think that's a big reason why. And look, I mean, if you can run the ball like that, I don't expect 210 yards against the Ravens, but if you can control the line of scrimmage and dictate terms running the ball like that against the Baltimore Ravens, that'll go a long way to helping your team try to win this game.
So, Kate, the big game of the weekend, Ravens and Bills. Obviously, 2 MVP candidates squaring off in Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. But this is a tough one to predict, at least for me, because I feel like I can see it going either way when it comes to a winner. Is there any bet you like in this game?
I do like the Ravens in this one. They just have the edge on both sides of the ball, and particularly offense with Derrick Henry. He's going to be nearly impossible to slow down. And I know the Bills get a couple linebackers back that they didn't have in that first game, but Derrick Henry just ran all over them in that first meeting. And I think that there's a good chance he does the same thing again. Plus, this Ravens defense, when they played earlier on in the season, I believe that was week 4, they were not the top defense that we've seen right now. Like, the Ravens right now have the best run defense in the league. Their passing defense has struggled throughout the season, and it was particularly bad early on in the year, but they've kind of figured things out. So I am a little nervous for this Bills squad, even being at home. The weather situation in Buffalo, it's going to be very chilly, maybe some elements, maybe some snow, but I don't think that necessarily gives the Bills like an added edge because Baltimore's cold and snowy too. Like, if this were the Dolphins going there, if this were the Rams that were going there, and the Rams will have a chillier game than they're typically used to, like, I think that would give more of an edge to the Bills. I just think that kind of negates it being these are both 2 cold weather teams. So I'm leaning towards the Ravens. This line has also flipped in favor of Baltimore, and I think that's very telling of where the sharp money is because the Bills were not favorites for all that long. So I'm going to take the Ravens in this one.